Hi there, hello, my name's Lines, great to see you. Now, today we're doing another 1-to-1 speed draw along, not sped up, in real time. It's going to be this character here with a hammer from a high angle. Now, if you like these Bob Ross style 1-to-1 speed draw alongs, I've got a whole playlist of them here in the description, and my instruction videos all have homework, and if you draw along with these 1-to-1 speed draw alongs, the drawing you make is the homework. So, I'd love it if you'd pop over to the Discord and share it there, and the link to the Discord is in the description. Now, if you like these videos, or my longer tutorials, consider liking, subscribing. Let me know in the comments how it went for you, what sort of things you'd like to see in future draw-alongs, or any questions you've got. And if you're in a position to do so, you could consider joining the Patreon. In the next month or so, I'm going to be revamping the Patreon rewards, so do stay tuned for that. In the meantime, to everyone who's considering it or is currently a patron, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Alright, let's get to it. Alright, so to begin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the frame into thirds, because I want to have a third alignment, but I still want to sort of center align. So I'm going to give myself a bit of a framework for where to put it. I'll sort of put a bit of a sighting viewfindery thing on it. There we go, and there. I'll put that on another layer. I'm just going to have that low. I'm just going to have that not terribly visible. So I don't want it to be too strong. I'll lower it down. I don't want it to be too overpowering, but I'm drawing something there. Alright, now I'm going to start putting out my base form. So I'll start with the head. And I want to have a high angle character who's holding a sort of big hammer thing over their shoulder and looking up towards the viewer. That's what I'm sort of after with that. So I'll have my view here, and the eye line there, and the shape of the head in there, roughly like that. Like that. I can come in and tune that later, it doesn't have to be perfect. Alright, groovy. Next I'm going to have the spine. Now since it's going to be disappearing down in perspective, this is probably going to terminate a bit shorter than I would be normally expecting. And there's going to be a lot of overlap, because when you view someone from above, it's like looking at a train that's coming into the station. You can see the front carriage just fine, but every carriage behind it is partially occluded or covered up by the carriage in front of it. So the same thing's going to happen here with these parts of the body, so like the pelvis and rib cage are going to be covered up. And then I'm going to do where the feet will be roughly. I'm not going to be too worried about the feet, just because with what I'm doing, I'm going to be doing them under a sort of skirt there, so I don't have to worry too much about them, but I do still want to have the feet roughly marked out to the right spots. So I'll have the sort of the skirt coming out around there, I think. That looks nice. And from above, it'll curve up all the way around. Like that. That looks pretty good. Right, and then the shoulders here are going to come out. They won't necessarily be that occluded, but it will be a bit occluded. There and there, and I'll have the hammer sitting across those shoulders, so next thing then is to decide where that hammer's going to go from and to, so I can assign the hands to it. So I feel like probably through there feels about right. I'll have a little hand around where that one's going to be, and a hand here where I think that one's going to be. Like that. Looks pretty good. And I can just do things for where I think the head's going to end up. So I'll have the head of the hammer, have one edge of it sort of follow that line there, just to sort of reinforce those third lines if I can. And then the hammer coming out like that, a bit of perspective to really show that sort of high angle. Alright, now with the shoulders, I've got them and I've got to connect them up to the wrists. So, I'll bend them out like that. And there's one like that. I'll have that come out more straight actually. Actually, no, we'll have that come out more straight. So I'll get my eraser, and I'm not going to fully erase anything. This is the sketch. I want to only ever really partially erase things, because I'm able to see what was sort of squirrely about it, so I can know what I need to fix. So I never really fully erase anything when I'm doing a sketch, unless I'm completely restarting an idea. In that case, I should probably be doing a new document. So, more like that. And that come down, looks about right. Right, now this one here, same dealio. Have that elbow coming down and then up there, I think. Yeah, that works pretty well. And so shoulder in and arm out like that, and having that get thicker at the end, and then the hand can go there. That's looking pretty good. Groovy. Now I'll start on some of the basic sort of face and hand construction, and I'll try not to zoom in until I absolutely have to. So for now, first thing I want to do is get those eyes in. So I'm going to do the little channels for them to be dug into, and then I'll do the shape of the eyes. This, and I'll probably shorten them down and close them up, but this is just the default position eyes for those. And sort of cranky brows. She's serious. Go. And I'll have my idea on where the hairline should be. So I'll have a side plane of the head and a line up from the side plane at 45 degrees. So I'll call them about there. Right, cool. I can start then building out the flow of where the hair will be. So I'll start there. And I'll have maybe one more sort of frondy thing coming up from it too. Groovy. Right, that coming up and over. I'm adding that mass of the hair. That and around there. And then coming around the side and then going from a rounded shape to more of a pointy shape. That'll be cute. And then a bit more here, some of the hair coming out in front. Sort of big 80s anime sort of front hair, like your Ranma halves and so forth. Righty. Now, got my base hair sections in. I've got my base body section in. I'll decide where I want this to sort of come up to. So I'll have like a the top of it will be like a what should we call it, like a collar that comes down to the top of the shirt, and then I'll have the belt there, I think, and making sure the front of the belt thing is more flat along the front, and then maybe have an extra sort of buckle. Nothing makes a thing look more like an RPG character than having far too many buckles and belt loops. Like that, and then I'll have the shape of the skirt coming down and out and around. I give it a bit of a sort of almost pleated, like a little bit of sort of pleat implied shape on these, I think. It's okay. And then the footsy's coming out. So if we have one coming out a bit further there to sort of balance the character, and then one maybe around there. That's looking pretty good. And then, starting on the hands, I'll have the hands coming over, and the mass of the thumb coming up. So I'll have that mass there, coming up there, and mass there, and the fingies coming over the top. And making sure they're not all the same length. And then I'm going to have the thumb coming up from the side here, like that, and there as well. And that one down the side as well. That's looking pretty good. Right, cool. I'll have some base idea on where I want these to be. I'll have the nose coming down a bit lower here, because the nose is going to follow that brow in, just like the eyes do, and then come out to follow that contour face. So the nose should probably go there. Right, groovy. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, now I've got a lot of the base pieces in, I'm going to grab my lasso tool here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect a couple of these pieces, just shuffle them around a bit so they're in the right spots. So things like, I want to move things like the hand up a little bit here. And since it's all very loose, sort of sketchy shapes, I don't have to worry too much about the edges getting a little bit unneat. And I'll have a look here where I want to have this. I might give myself a little bit more space here. So I might grab a lot of this stuff and just sort of move it out a bit, just to fill out that space on the side there. And just give that arm a little more distance there as well. So put the head to around there-ish. And then maybe make the rest of the body. I'll grab that. I'll just grab these little bits and pieces and just sort of shuffle them about a bit until I get them to a space that I sort of like, and then I'll just neaten up those little edges. And things like this arm here. Move that out a little bit as well. And I'll get the elbow down a bit as well. Good. I'll maybe see about this sort of dressy bit here. Move it down a smooch. And pull the top up a little bit. About right. Then scale the head up a little bit, just so I really can push that perspective. Again, it's looking a bit better. See, I'll just partially erase that. What I can do is I'll lower the opacity of that layer a bit. I'll grab a new layer, I'll merge it together. I'll turn off those little guideline things as well. Right, and now what I can do is I'll go over and just sort of cement in where I want some of these shapes to be with a much darker bit of line art. Maybe not that dark, but they're just to sort of really nail in where I want them to sit, what sort of shapes I want, where these sort of things, where I want the sort of top and bottom to be, and just sort of landmark them out a little bit. And once I've done that, I'll then start refining the sketch once I've got these larger pieces to just where I want them. Because currently I'm only dealing in big bits. I'm not going to deal in detail yet. I'm going to keep my brush big to make sure I don't get tempted to start sort of nailing detail in too soon. So I want to make sure I've got those large bits first, that sort of strong foundation, before I start building up some of those details. Before I start sort of polishing it, I want to make sure it's the right rough shape. Alright, a bit more of the dress there. That's looking about right. Get the width right on the torso there, and just pull this shoulder out a little bit there, just to give it a bit more real estate there, because I do have a bit of a bad habit of letting the shoulders be a bit narrow. And then across there. That's looking better. Maybe a bit of sort of spiky hair at the back there. And sort of bring that top bit up even more with that high angle. Because we're looking from below, we'll see a lot more of that. And here I feel like that's landing pretty well. Sort of pouty off to the sidey look. That can work okay, I reckon. And then down like that. That's looking okay, I think. And so from here, what I'm going to do is I'll start working on some of the detail elements. So what I want to do then is I'll do the thing I just did. So I'll just do a bit of a light erase on this. Yeah, the eraser tool, just lightly go over it. And I've got an idea of where that detail can go. So now that I've got that, now I'll actually start zooming in a little bit. So I'm going to make my brush a bit smaller. I'm taking it down to still pretty big, it's about 17. And I'm going to zoom in, and I'll start entering in some of those details. Now that I've got scaffolding shapes in to where I want them to be. So for that, I'll start on the head. Whoops, daisy. I'll start on the head. A little hoagie here. There we go. I'm going to be very, very rough with this, because I don't worry too much about it, because I'll be going over and inking this, so I don't have to worry about getting it all absolutely right. I just have to make sure there's enough information here so that the inking goes smoothly. Go a bit there as well, and have the hair coming out. So I've got the eyes here. I'll sort of dial them in a little bit, just to make sure they're absolutely on target. One. And I'll do another one over here, like this. And a bit more there. Righty, and the nose comes down and out and follows that line. There we are. A little pouty mouth there. Come in and then lift the cheek out a little bit. Like that, sort of landing where I want to be. That. Right, the curve of the face coming in the side there. A little bit of a sort of hint of lower lashes there. I don't want to add too much because I want it to be very much more sort of cutesy than overly sort of showy. That's looking nice. And then the cranky brows coming in over the top like that. And another cranky brow there. Go, make it look real kinky. Right, here we go. And a bit more there. And then a little spoofle off and in. I'll try and simplify this shape down if I can. So in like that. And then I'll have the sort of two divide sort of bits there. And I'll try and match that kind of shape language here. I won't have the divided bits be the same shape or size exactly, but I'll do two of them, and that sort of hopefully will communicate that rhythm pretty well. I'll do sort of a paw shape for all the excess sort of extra bits of hair here, so a little paw shape there as well. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Come in a little more. Alright, moving over to the hands, I'll have the thumb folding in a little bit more, and I'll really push the weight of that pad of the thumb there underneath, and this one here as well. And then come under the arm, like that. And then this bit here and have that come out. Now I'm going to do a line here. This line here isn't going to be in the line art, but I want that line there because I'm going to use that for a bit of tone. Because I do want to illustrate the difference in those surfaces there, but I want it to be a much more sort of gentle illustration of difference. So I'm going to have those lines there, but they're going to be a bit of tone. There'll be a few more of them, but I just want to make a point of them with that one. There, I'm going to have these middle two fingers at the top, and this one here. It's going to come in just behind the thumb, and of course the pinky is not going to come around as far because the pinky is, of course, shorter. Right, that coming in to join the base of the hammer. Might do a bit of detail with that. There, like that. Good O. I'm doing 13 minutes. Yeah, I feel like it's going on target. Alrighty. There, and on the edge of the hammer, I might even do a little bit of an extra little bit around the front here. Make it very clear this is not, however, Thor's hammer. That would be inciting a lawsuit from Disney. I'm not doing that. Go. Yeah, a little bit more around there, and sort of an undersurface, like a little sort of platformy thing that's attached to the bottom there. Need to fix that. Just gonna grab this. Yeah. And short it up a bit. Fixed. Love that. Yeah, that's looking good. And then have that come through here. I don't mind if the lines overlap a little bit, because this one's going to be done with ink in a second. I'll have that sort of neck guard thing coming around there, like a sort of leather, sort of warrior's neck guard thing, whatever it is. And have that coming under and there. And then maybe like a sort of chest leathery bit here. That come in, there's a little under bit there. So it goes, where am I going to go? So under there, out and down, and just have that come down a little bit. So it wraps around on roughly the same height on both sides. And then having this come maybe down a little bit more, just to sort of show that sort of tilt of the spine. And then belt bits there, so I've got a sort of circular loop shape. Like the idea of that, and that'll sort of come around a little bit of excess belt there. And then to where the actual belt latchy bit is that shape and this shape. I always get these bits mixed up, so if I have got the belt sort of latch squirrely, don't tell me. I did my best. Right, a bit more there, and then a bit of a first skirt layer of it, so I'll have like a flat layer of it, and then underneath I'll have the sort of pleated layer. I think that'll look nice. That, and it gives a bit of sort of blacksmithy looking detail, having a lot more sort of belt stuff like belt tools and so forth. I'm not going to have them, but I do want this to be a little bit sort of blacksmith coded. I think blacksmiths are awesome. Or maybe I've just been playing too much wilds. Alright. That looks okay there. I'll have a bit of overlap here with that arm coming down, and then the shoulder there, and coming in for the arm to the elbow, and up towards the wrist, and trying to be really mindful of these pads here of the wrist, of the palm rather, and then I'll have the thumb coming over, and that big pad there. There's a lot of three-dimensionality to the palm from those big pads you get. There's the one next to the thumb, the one on the outer ridge of the hand, so the outer ridge of the palm, and then of course the one that sits under the fingers. With the fingers closed like this, you can't really see all of them, but the idea is that they are there, and I'll show them sort of squishing out to the edges. I'll have that pinky coming up a lot higher because the angle's a bit stiff on that. Where's that coming through? About there. That's about right. And then I'll have the little sort of pommel, or whatever they call the bit on the end. I think it's a pommel. Maybe that's only for swords, not hammers. Maybe hammers don't have pommels. Maybe they have some other sort of fancy French word. I'm not sure. Alright, I feel like that's roughly on target. Oh, that looks good. And I'll have things like some eyelashes coming out there. Just not a lot, just a little bit, just to make it look a bit sort of cuter. And then I'll have maybe where I plan to have like little blush stickers. I think that'll be kind of cute. And where I plan to have the eyes, I'll have them be kind of small to really sort of grab that intensity of expression. Looks pretty good. Let's come on target. Was that bit of the hand there? Could have a bit more bulge to it coming out, and that one in there. I feel like I want to have something around the wrist here to balance out the sort of big metalness there, but maybe that unevenness is good actually. No, I'm going to have like a little bangle or something, a little sort of wrist thingy. Like that, maybe. Yeah, I feel like a little bangle might be good. Alrighty, that's that there. Feeling good about that. Oh, a bit of the ear might be visible as well here. There as well. Alright, that's feeling pretty good. I've got a couple of notches there, but I can probably just do them in the inking pass, which I should just do. And this is hopefully, this sort of hammer here is going to allude to that sort of upward angle that everything's sort of being viewed from. There's a vanishing point off the page somewhere to the bottom. And then where I think the shadow should go would probably be off around there somewhere. I'll go for that as a lighting direction. Right, groovy. So, lower the opacity on that. New layer. Time for the inking at, what is it, 18 minutes. Yeah, I feel like I'm doing pretty well. Right, get my black. I'm going to go for my inking brush, which is the same as the one I just used, but just a lot more smoothing on there. I've got very unsteady hands, so you probably don't need to do that, but I do, because I have terribly unsteady hands. Yeah, there, and out, and across, and out, across, and then I'll have this line here, and go, and up, and across, and up. There we go. And another notch there, so it matches the bottom. So start the notch in the right place, though. That would be enormously helpful. Notch and up. There we are. Groovy. Now here, I'm not actually going to draw that line in. I want to have that be a different sort of surface of metal, but I don't want it to feel like it needs a line art piece. So the inside edge won't be a sort of overlap like the other one. So I'm going to leave them there, but I might do a little... Well, maybe I will. Maybe I will. Put it there. I want it to be a separate object a little bit. Come in and up there like that. I won't necessarily have it completely solid all the way over. Whoops, daisy. Across, but I've got a bit. And here, I'll try and bring it in. And so have it come from cylinder shape and in. And try and see that this is nice and flat. I've got this one tilting a bit too far that way. I've got to have it more that kind of direction, I reckon. That's a bit better. Right, groovy. And then down and here. I'll have this line be a bit broken. Whereas this needs to be nice and straight. So we get nice and in there, across, and across. And I'll start doing the fingers in. I'll start with the things that are at the front. So that would be the thumb, over like that. And back around. And then coming back and make that nice big healthy bulge of the palm there. I'll have this bit coming up and around like that. And then with the fingers, I'll start with the pointer finger and move over. Maybe the pinky? I'll start with the pinky. That. And keep these shapes nice and rounded. And 1, and 2, and another one for 3, and have that one come down. And from above that, I'll have this come in there, and then these will come over like that. But I think I might define the difference in these fingers with my shading layer when I get to that. So I'll leave them as is for the time being. And I'll smooth that down there, and out, and in, and there's that bit where the notch of the elbow comes out. So I'll just bring these into the hair here. Try to keep them roughly in line. If it's trouble getting the line straight for the hammer or sword or whatever it is, what you can do is you can just draw that line in all the way through the fingers and then just erase sections of it out. Like here, if you see the top of the head, you can draw that line out like that. There. And that means that either side of this is quite smooth. And so now, if I just take a chunk out of the middle and go back to my inking brush, I can have a lovely clean transition between them. Oops, daisy. There's 2 lines, and it doesn't break. It doesn't sort of come out slightly above on one side. All right, Rooney. And let's continue down here. So that coming in and around and down and out. Oh, goodness me. And down here as well. Yeah. Wonder what happened. Bit of hair coming down and up and down and around, and then I'll do the line of the face. I'm a bit funny about getting the line of the face wrong, so if I do have to retry this one a couple of times, I do ask for your patience. Just have a bit of a funny thing about getting this one spot on. It's one of the few places where I'm very much losing the battle against my perfectionism, but if I've gotten this right first go, or close enough too, I might just move on. Yep, will. Alright, and I'm going to do the eyelashes, and I'll leave a void in them. And I'm going to fill that in when I come back over to fill in some extra, actually not have that as being part of that cranky brow. I'll fill those black bits in when I come over and do my second pass with the line art. And then 1 and 2, lovely. And I'll make sure I get this curve right. Remember that it's not sort of up and down based on the page, it's up and down based on the figure. Alright, and I'll allude to little bits of that there. It's too high, so make sure they're lined up. So I'll do a bit of error correction. And that's the thing with error correction, I'll do a little bit at every stage of the drawing. So I'll go over and do everything to about probably 80% correct. And every time I do a different pass, like a different pass of my sketch, or a different pass of the line art, etc., what I'm doing is I'm taking that opportunity to fix it up a little bit. So instead of trying to get all of it 100% at the very start, what I can do is get all of it at 80%, and every time I do a pass, I can do another 5-10% and get it right. And it'll get to about 90% right overall. And that's all you can never really get. Like, you never get 100% right on it. There'll always be things that can be improved or things that need a bit of sort of touch up, but getting it to good enough is definitely where you want to get it to. And perfection literally can never happen. So as long as you've got a point you're roughly happy with or not too ashamed with, or it's just sort of due and you're going to do it, which is kind of the story how a lot of my work gets finished, that can be just as good. So like Krusty the Clown says, it's not just good, it's good enough. Go and I'll wind that in a bit more there. That looks a bit better. Alright, and I'll have the excess bit of belt coming around this sort of circular loop here. I don't know if this necessarily makes a lot of sense. I don't do many sort of manual leather belty stuff, but I feel like if it just looks okay, then I have probably done well enough. So I'll put a little bit of a latch there. That and over like that. You can come over that and there. And there and here. Alright, there we go. And that's the bit that can hold a bit of a loose bit of belt. It can work pretty well. Like that and in. Lovely. It's coming along. And then as I move down, I'll have this bit of the outer layer of the skirt coming in. It's got much more sort of rounded shape to it. And then another one around here. Another much more rounded shape that comes around. And then, starting from the back, I'll have this sort of more pleated shape of the skirt there. I might do a bit of detail on that, like a bit of sort of gilding or whatever, but what I'm going to do is, if I am planning to do that, I won't do it with Lineart, because I don't want it to really just sort of disturb the shape. If I have a little fine detail there, and I do it with Lineart, I'll end up with much more Lineart than, for instance, if I want to do it in gold, and you know what, I'll do it in gold. What I'll end up having is a lot of Lineart and a lot of black from the Lineart, but I won't actually end up with a lot of that sort of gilding. I'll end up with more black than gold. So if you want to do lots of little fine gold on something, you may want to skip the Lineart, because the Lineart will fill it in with black, and if it's fine enough, you'll end up with more black than gold, and that'll make it a little black bit of edging, and that may not go the right direction tone-wise for what you're after. There, I'll have to maybe like a... No, that's wrong. I'll have that like that, and then like that, and I'll split these up with maybe a bit of Lineart here. Alright, looking good. And then coming out from the hair there, I've got the ear roughly the right height. I feel like that's where the ear would be. And then finish out a fringe here, like that. And there, and there. That's not... Yeah, maybe like more like there. And there. That's a bit better. Alright, cool. Over the top like that. And there. And I'll get that Lineart right for the hammer. It's coming around this direction, so we need to be more straight with it, I reckon. So maybe more that direction. That looks pretty right. It looks good enough. And the rest of it I can just say it's perspective distortion, if anyone asks. Don't tell them, I might just be pretending that, because I didn't get it right in the sketch. Right, a bit more there, and around here and down. A bit more of a low shape there. That's a bit better. Yeah, there we go. How you get this thing on and off, I have no idea. But I thought that a lot with bangles over the years, so maybe there's a secret to it I'm not aware of. Alright, that looks pretty good. Looks okay there. Yep, it's a nice sort of fairly simple design. That's by design. I don't want it to be too much work. Let's zoom out and see what it is. Now I'm just going to flick the sketch on and off to make sure I haven't missed any details, and I have. I've missed those little bits of sort of implied lower lash there, on there, and on there. And then let's do that again and see if I haven't missed anything. Yep. I reckon that's pretty good. Alright, groovy. Now I'm going to turn off that. I'm going to colour this red. And then what I'm going to do is going to make a new layer and go over the top of it with my brush here. And I'm just going to make a bit of extra dark little bits that thicken the line up in some places. Now you may be able to do your line weighting all in one pass. And if you can, I am enormously happy for you. I, however, do not have the future brain necessary for that, so I have to go and do it with my old-fashioned smooth brain and do extra little bits on a separate layer to add things like ambient occlusion to make the line art just a bit more depthful. Now this is entirely optional. It's just a thing I do because I like the effect it has for the work it takes, but it probably takes a bit much work, depending how much you like the effect it gives. So if this isn't your cup of tea, you don't have to do it. But I just like making little dark bits here where the line art goes in, little bits of ambient occlusion, and I feel like that adds a little bit of depth to the figure and communicates a bit of the form, but again, it's entirely optional. It's just a thing I like to do because it makes me happy. And that's the whole point of this whole thing, so I'm going to keep doing it. But again, it's optional. You may do your line art differently. You may decide you want to do a thick line around the very outside as a sort of outline, as more of a sort of stickery pop art aesthetic, which can look quite nice. Or you may decide that you want to do your line art thicker on the surfaces that are facing away from your primary light source and have your line art help to communicate the primary lighting in your situation of your image, which is another excellent choice. You've already heard Mr. Brunette talk about that one, so it's quite a good choice, and his works come out quite nice, so he must definitely know what he's talking about, one would expect. Alrighty, here we are, and a bit more under there, and there, that looks good. I might just add that little, I missed one of my cranky brows, so a little opportunity there, and probably up like that. I feel like that's about right. Was that in the sketch? Let's have a look at the sketch. Yeah, basically the same. Cool bananas, moving down the image. A little bit coming under here. The rest of that I'm going to show with a bit of tone when the time comes. And a little bit in these little crevicy cracky bits here, and a little crevicy cracky bit there. And here where it comes in close to the face, I'll lower that in. And here where it moves into the top, and here in little bits of the gap where the collar sort of neck protector thingy meets the chest bandolier, whatever. I should probably know the words for any of these, but I don't know the words for any of them, so if you know the words for them, let me know in the comments and I'll try to remember it for next time. But even as I do remember, I have terrible trouble with it. I always get the lats and the traps mixed up when I'm doing anatomy, and I'm a fair way into doing a couple of videos on that, and I still can't remember them or get them sort of right, or the right way round, so maybe I'll never remember. I'll do my best. So more of these little bits here, just the dark there, just for ambient occlusion's sake. Again, utterly optional. I just like doing it because I feel it gives a nice effect. Alright, moving down to here. A little bit more. A few little bits there as well. And in there. And there. And here as well. Do we have any other bits? Maybe a bit more there in the corners here. And there. These bits don't necessarily need it, so I can probably leave them, but that bit could do with one. And there, just darken that up where it all sort of comes together and ambiently occludes itself. And other stuff. Going a bit there and a bit where the two belts come in nice and close. Right, having a look down here, make sure these aren't broken shapes. And a bit more. There's a bit of dark there. It's looking fairly nice. Okay, I don't really feel like the rest of them need any of it. That's pretty good. Maybe a bit more under here. And maybe a little bit on the bottom ridge of the nose there. Looks pretty good. There, and then there I might even do a couple little spots there. I might actually get rid of you. I don't feel like you're at quite the right angle. You're not quite reaching up towards that corner there. It is come out that way a little bit. That looks pretty good. Alright, now much like flicking the sketch on and off, I'm going to flick the first line off and on to make sure I don't have any areas that are just sort of blank. I want to add something for the chest. Something very simple, I think. So just a little sort of emblem. So maybe like a little thing like that. And like that. And just a little couple of notches on top there. Just a little something to make it look a bit more RPG-ish. And sort of just break up the shapes a little bit, I think. And a bit there, like that, a little notch there, and do like a little blue medallion thing, which I'll come back to. So to get that shape right the first time. That's good enough. Right, and then add a couple of little bits. Need some corners, so I'm going to fill those corners. Lovely. Right, that's looking pretty good. So I'll just quickly turn that off. So easy. And so you'll see what happens. I'll just sort of fit that in. When I turn that ambient occlusion layer on and off. You can see the thickness and how it works, especially around the hands and the difference it gives to the image and the figure with a bit of depth just on that line art. So I'm just going to now grab those, merge those together, and I'll call this the ink. I'll make a new layer underneath that, and I'll call that the flats. Alrighty. So now I'm going to grab some sort of pale sandy colour here from my palette. I might use that as my backing colour. Normally I'll just leave it be white, but I might just give this one a fill. And I've just realised that my fill is on refer only to editing layer, so I'll try that again. Slightly paler and less saturated too, actually, while I have the chance. And I'll just fill that in. It should fill in all the excessy bits around the character. There we go, haven't missed any bits. Lovely. Alright, now for the colour of them, I don't want to have much colour. I want to have her be very sort of earthy tones, and the hammer be very sort of cool metallic tones. I'm going to go for a sort of blue colour around here, and then go for this as a fairly dark, desaturated colour for my metallic. And drop some of that there. That's about right, maybe a bit paler. A little paler, a little bit paler. A little bit bluer. That's more like it, yeah, there we are. Alright, throw a bit more down there. And a little squiggly bit that's missing there, and I might add that to that same colour. Alright, groovy. Now what I'll do is I'll start on the brown hair, with brown of course being orange, so I'm going to go for quite a light sort of earthy orange, maybe sort of reddish one. Maybe about there, I reckon. That's about right. Yeah, maybe more red. That's sort of too mustardy. No, not quite red enough. A bit more, maybe out there. Yeah, that's it. That's the one. Alright, groovy. Make sure I get my Angie brows in. And I think that's probably all I need from that brown. I have a very similar pale brown to use for the leather. I'm just going to change the tone just a smidge. Of that, looking good. And then the leather of the belts and those bits there. That looks about right. That little squiggly little mist bit in there. Oh, and of course the leather shoes. Alright, that's that. Now I'll get the green of the dress. I might go for a relatively sort of cool green. Relatively. Around there, I think. Maybe a little bit bluer. Like that. Yeah, that's about right. Alright, cool. Throw some of that down. On there and there. And those little excessy bits that seem to have been missed. Bit of weird infill. Alright, now the skin I think is next. Actually, I'll do the gold little bits first. So I'm going to grab a gold, which is going to be closer to orange. And that colour about there, I feel like, is too mustardy. A bit more there, a bit more up there. That, yeah, it's a bit closer. Yeah, I feel like that's probably not quite bright enough. More yellow. Ah, that's much more like it. Yeah, there we are. Alright, a bit more there, and that looks pretty good. Coolio. And now for eyes, I might go for a nice sort of rich, sort of orangey brown. So much more rich one. So I want this to be a sort of cavalcade of interesting browns. Alright, very nice. And now for the skin tone, I'll go with a very warm sort of orangey colour. It'll all be a sort of a forest of oranges. About there. No, pinker and paler, I think. Up there. Paler. That's it. Well, bit missing there. Now, one thing I'm going to do before I fill this in, I'm going to grab my pen tool, and I'm going to draw in the, whoopsie daisy, the edge of where the skin tone will be. This. That. Just close those gaps up. That. Once I've done that, I'm going to fill them in. This, and like that, and like that. But what you'll notice is that some of that actually has little holes in it. And in fact, it's not white of the whites of the eyes, it's a lack of colour. You can see when I turn off the white of the paper, it disappears. Now, in this case, we'll just merge the white paper with it, but for the sake of completeness, I'll show you what I do normally when I do want to leave that transparency there. After I grab a nice sort of blue for this, maybe that sort of blue's nice. Yeah, that'll do. Alright. Oh, that's those. Right, now turn the white off there. What you can do is you want to fill that in. If you do fill that in with white, what you'll notice is that it'll sort of overfill, and you get these sort of excess little liney bits there, like that little excess bit there. It's a bit gross. What you can do, undo that, and that. You control click on the layer, that selects every bit of the pixel that's there. You flip it, select inverse, and now, no matter what you do, you won't have it overlap at all. It'll just fill in where there's no pixels already, and where there are pixels, it won't replace them. Alright, that's those. Now, next thing is I want to minimize some of these little bits of white and excess. Now, I can go over the pen and do that, and I will, probably for 1 or 2 bits, but in the meantime, what I might do is I'm going to use one of the layer effects here. So I'm going to go to Filter, Correction, Adjust Line Width. There you go. Go to Filter, Correction, and Line Width. There you go. And I'm just going to increase the line width a little bit. And what you'll notice is that it's going to fill in and make those pixels a bit wider. And it's going to just close up some of those shapes a little bit. Yeah, and we'll just get rid of a few of those little white specks. And that means I'm free to get in with the pen tool and just fix up the 1 or 2 that really needed doing manually. Like that. There we are. There's not many of them there, which is good. Alright, Rooney. Now, with that, I can probably start on the shading. But before I do that, I just want to touch on a couple of bits of coloring first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a second layer, and I'm going to make the first layer a reference layer. So what that does is when I grab my Magic Wand tool, and I go refer to a selection for referred layers, if I'm on another layer, I can select this, it'll select all the green from my flats, and now I can draw on it, and I don't have to worry about it selecting other things or missing bits. It'll just be using this set of flat colors as my selections. It's very, very handy. So now I'm going to just do a little bit of an edge around this one, I think. I might put a bit more smoothing on that one, just so it comes out a bit neater. A little bit of a gold edge to you, and you as well. And there also, you can see if I had done some, whoopsie-daisy, some line art for this, I'd end up with another big black line there, and I don't want that. I want this to be much more of a gentle shape. So I'll pop in some of that there. That's good. And I might do a little bit of simplified shapes just in these little base bits here. So not a lot, just something to sort of imply some filigreeing of some sort. So maybe just a repeating shape that comes up and over and 2 notches. And I feel like that's probably enough. Like that as well. Add 2 notches. And just thin it up as we get there. Okay, cool. And then around and over and 2 notches. And just something that's really easy to make sure I can repeat it and have it be consistent. And over, notch, notch. Round and over, notch, notch. Round and over, notch, notch. Round and over, notch, notch. And again, this way. Notch, notch. So I'm saying how easy it was. Yeah, there we go. That's looking pretty good. I don't think I need to do any more patterning on that. Lovely. Alright, next I'm going to do my color variation on the skin tone. So I'm just going to grab the skin there, and have I done that on that layer? No, I did it on that layer. That's fine. Alright, now I'm going to get my brush and red, and I'm going to use the soft airbrush, which is something we only use for effects. The soft airbrush should not be used for shading. Well, absolutely fine for effects. A soft airbrush, very, very big. Be very, very gentle. We're just going to add bits of redness just towards the edge of the cheek there, and the nose, and the elbows here, and the fingers like that, and the fingers there as well. Now it's coming out a bit strong like this, and that's fine. I'm going to weaken it in a second. I just want to have it there, and then what I'm going to do is I'll make some of the ear as well, lower the opacity down a bit, just so it's there, just to give it a bit more of a sort of a variation in skin tone. Another one here, D, and I'll make this one a multiply layer, and I'm going to get a nice sort of pale, desaturated, warmish purple, and I'll switch to my sketching brush. How am I doing? 42 minutes? Goodness me, I better hurry this along, shouldn't I? Alright, let's crack in then. So, the first thing I'm going to do is I'll start shading the hammer, I think. So for that, I'll start looking at the areas that need shading first. I'll grab my magic wand. I will then select my magic wand, that, and I'll straighten it up. And then I'll start brushing this in. Now I'll use big broad shapes first, and I'll come in and do corrections later. Now, one of the things you'll probably notice at first is that this is a very, very purple bit of shading. That's okay. I've got a step later where I'll correct all of my shading colors to work a bit better with the image I'm doing. For now, I just want to get the shapes of where the shading needs to be and get them in. And shadow-wise, this probably needs to come down like that, probably. Hopefully. There we go. And a bit of shine there. Not shine, sorry. Shading in like that. And then more there on that top edge. And a little bit in this little integration here with that. There, and I'll just cut a little bit of the corner off there. You can see I'm using C on the keyboard to switch between this as brush and this as eraser. And that can be really handy because if I actually went to my eraser, my eraser is too big. Whereas the brush is this big draw and this big to erase. So using C on the keyboard to switch your current brush to an eraser is a great way of having the same sort of size and shape that you're shading with be the size and shape that you're erasing with. It really gives you that sort of strength of control and naturally sort of fits what you're working with as you go already. So a bit more under there and a bit more under the side there. Looks nice. Coolio. And I'll cut a little bit out along the edge because I'm going to have a bit of a rim shine there on all the metallic stuff. So I'll cut that out there so it's got somewhere to pick up. That looks okay. Moving on to the shaft. So I'll have this be consistent sort of shape as we go along. So I'll have it be there and have it get really close to the edge on the bottom side there. The thing with reflections is they are consistent. So I'm going to have that cylinder shape be the same kind of distorted reflection all the way along. And then as it sort of faces up a little bit, I'll go that way. And as it goes down, I'll have it disappear. I'll maybe have that whole sort of thing fill in there. And then I can have the same sort of thing happen up here on the top edge there, and that'll help it be consistent along the length of it. Go, a bit of that. That's looking good. Alrighty, and here as well, that on the same material there, so I'll have it coming around. That's the shadow cast by the hand. And then I'll have the lower surface of this have that same sort of shine map where it's got that lower dark shape there, and I'll cut the end off it. That, so it's got the same sort of map. I'll zoom in a bit so it's easier to see what I mean. So there, making sure I've got that edge left nice and clean there. Better. Here we are. That's looking pretty good. Right, moving on to the hair first, actually. Right, the hair's going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to do very, very simple hair if I can. So I'm running a little shy on time, but that's okay. I don't want to rush things. I want them to take as long as they take, but at the same time, I don't want this to be an illustration that's going to take you forever to do, so I want to make sure I'm not making too much of a complicated one. I've indulged myself too terribly, because I know I have had a bit of a habit with that. I've got a bit of a long one, a character illustration one that I was going to do for one of these, but it just ended up being too long. Maybe we'll throw it on Patreon or something, that'll be funny. Right, there we go. There as well, and there as well. Oops a daisy, oops a daisy, oops a daisy. Alright, and then a bit more there. I'll just do a bit of a simple cast shadow over it. Right, next on this bit here, I don't feel like I need much, but I might have a little bit of a dark bit in here. Just I feel like there's a bit of a crevice there that needs to be expressed. And these, I'll have some line here to continue. So here I could have done this with line art, but I want to do it with a bit of tone instead. So I feel like that communicates a little more gently, that sort of direction of the hair, without that sort of line art taking it over a bit. The back, a little bit of a divoty shape, where the hair sort of gathers in a bit, like that works. And then I'll do this for a sort of plane of the back of the hair there. Yep, that sort of works. That looks good. I'll just go over the line here and then erase it out just that way. I can have a nice sort of clean set of lines there. So that one there, and then I'll cut daisy in here. That's much neater and much faster. And then, of course, a bit of line there for the drop shadow of that front layer of hair. Because having the hair drop shadow from one bit to another is a great way to show that depth. So that's the hair done. Right, let's move on to the skin tone. Now, a bit more, so this one's going to be pretty straightforward. I'll do a bit of sort of shade over the knuckles there. feel like that works. I've got a bit of sort of shade from it being between the head and the hammer. Sort of ambient shading, kind of. I don't know. I feel like it needs a bit on the top. Maybe I just want it. That's the thing. Maybe it doesn't need it. Maybe I do. Alright, a bit more there, and I'll throw a little bit more, and I'll do these little divisions between the fingers with little bits of tone instead of line art. That way I can still have that clear communication of difference, but I don't have to have that big hard line that comes all the way in. I want that to sort of soften the hands. I do the same sort of thing with teeth. Notice when you draw teeth, there'll be a sort of big solid bar, like a sort of like a mouth protector that's white. And the reason for that, for a lot of people, is that it's much softer than having a much more hard description, where you have like each individual teeth and gums described. And actually, I'll turn the line art on. I remember what line art looks like. So I'll put that up there and just sort of see where I had that. So I had that around there, I think. Cool. I'll get that there. So I've got my sketch back on, just so I've got that idea of where that needed to be. Yeah, about there. Zoom in a bit and just sort of add a bit more to it. Like that. That looks good. Yeah, that'll do. And I'll do a bit of a sort of cast shadow across there from the head. Maybe it's got a bit too much on the chest there, so I'll just pull some of that away. That, and then that bit in there, that sort of works maybe. And then just that narrow bit of ambient occlusion light in there. Cool. Alrighty, and that ear, of course, will be completely shaded out. And this one, the top of the ear will be shaded out, I reckon. And then looking at the hand here, a lot of the same. I might actually do just a little bit of a plane of shading along the front of the fingers here, like that. There. Let me get my eraser. I'm just going to soften it a bit. So I want there to be a little bit of a plane difference there, but not a lot of one. So I'm just going to go over that and do a sort of pale one first. Now, I'm going to do the detail-y bits. I'll do things like that little darker bit under the hand there, where that's occluded, and the bit under here where the mass of the thumb pad comes over the wrist, like that. That looks good. And I feel like that's probably all I need to do. Or maybe do a bit of a line for the edge of the thumb. The crease comes in like that. Just a little bit in there. Alright, now for the shoulder, a lot of the same thing. It's going to be a bit tricky to figure out where I want to do the drop shadow here, so I feel like that's probably pretty good. I might leave a bit of that. I might open up the shoulder shading a little bit there, I think. And then have this bit of where the pectoral meets the breast, and have that darker there. And then, actually, no, I might shade. Oh, this is all moving down a fair bit, so I might do this kind of shape here. Yeah, maybe it's sort of a shape there. When it comes out more, so I'll have the shadow of the arm dropped over it. And then this sort of crease here from that bit of the arm there, that sort of works. Maybe darken that there a little bit. Big work. Right, now the face, I'm not going to do too much on the face. I'm just going to have a couple of bits of drop shadow here, just to sort of frame it a little bit. So there's the hair dropping to the side there and there as well. And then just a smooch around here for the sake of the roundness of the face. And then a little bit above the nose. And the bit above the nose is going to be similar to that bit I did on the hand there. I'm going to do it in, and then I'm going to shape it, and then I'm going to erase it out partially. So this bit of shading here on top of the nose isn't shading based on the primary light source. This is a bit of shading you'll see on pretty much any angle, because this is some ambient occlusion shading where that bridge of the nose sinks in the eyes there. So I'll lighten that up a little bit like that. That's pretty good. Alright, looks nice. Alright, I'll do some shading on the skin as well. Just a little bit of the crease of the eyes. There, like that. And in there. A bit more there. Yeah, that's good. Cool. Okay, I'll grab some, and I'll grab the eyes and the eye whites at the same time, or the iris and the eye whites rather. So I'll do a big sort of blue bit on the middle bit of the eye there. And then I'll do a shape coming over like that. To really sort of shape that iris as being a concave surface. And then I'll erase the little excessy bits off the sides. and then do the whites of the eyes. Shading is going to be around like that. Again, it'll come out much too strong on the whites of the eyes, but I'm going to go over and do a step in a second, I promise, where I straighten it up. So, now the leathery bits, this should be pretty straightforward. So I'm going to add a little bit of detail here and there to this one, just because I want there to be a bit more communication of it being a slightly more complicated sort of leathery shape. So I'll grab my leather, and I'll do the big shapes first. So things like this big shape there, and this big shape there, like that. And then on the neck, same thing, I'll have this sort of big shadow bit there, and up to there. And once we've got those, I'll knit them up a little bit, and then I'm going to mess around with them a bit. So for instance, along here, I'm going to take some off the top edge here, and the top edge here, and that little miscellaneous bit I dropped there. And then I'm also going to add some little bits. So I'll switch over to darker, and I'm just going to add a little bit of a rim along here. Like this, like that. Just add a little bit of a lip of sort of texture to it. And then I might also actually sort of clean this up a little bit. Don't be too detailed with it, because I realise the clock is ticking. But I'll have a bit of this come down there, and this come down the side over here as well. Like that. It's looking pretty good. I'll do the same sort of thing on this here. So I'll have that sort of, oops, wrong way. A little darker bit there, and then I'll have some lighter bits above it, just to communicate that it's a sort of a crease or a fold like that. That looks good. And then, if I've got that in place, let's have a look-see. So the next thing I might do is add some bits where I'm going to take some shading out. So I might add a little bit across the front here, and then I'm going to take a bit off directly below it, and that'll give me a little bit of a lip there of the stitching. That sort of leathery sort of texture. That looks pretty good. And I might do a little bit in here maybe. That looks pretty good. All right, Ruby. I'll do the same sort of thing on the belts here. So once I've moved them down a touch, I'm going to go in and do, again, big broad shapes first. So I'll do where I feel like the big sort of shadow is going to be. So around there, like that. And then around here, like that. And once I've done them, I'll then go in and add those sort of different detail-y bits. So on this, I'm just going to add little seams on the leather, just so it looks more sort of, realistic, sort of believable, that kind of thing. There we go. A bit more under there as well. That, and then I'll press C to switch between erasing and drawing. I'm just going to do the same thing as I did before, and just sort of erase some bits out, so like on the edge along here, so that broadly the surface is still shaded, but I can still have a bit of communication of that texture there. Alright, there as well, a bit of a sort of including shadow in there, I think. That might be nice. And there as well, underneath. And of course a little bit of drop shadow from that. It's not a big drop shadow, but it'll help. It will help. Coolio. Alright, next thing I'll do is the green of the dress and the gold. They're the same sort of colour, so I'll grab them and them together. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll do some big broad areas of shading. And again, the shading is going to look very yucky here with the purple over the top of this green. But I'm going to have that same sort of idea of having shaded bits with more detail on it as well. So big broad areas first, and then neatening it up. So big broad area here, like that. And then a big broad area probably coming down around there, I reckon. Maybe a bit higher, like that. And then I'll go in detail. So I'll do things like a little bit of a drop shadow from one layer to the next, down like that. A bit of a drop shadow from the belt onto the outfit as well. There and there. And then again from one layer to another. A bit of shading there, and maybe a bit of a bigger drop shadow for the belt. Oh, that's coming out a bit too fast. We'll pull that back in. Alright, and a bit more there. That looks pretty good. I'll do okay. A bit more of an ambient shadow in there. Looks nice. Right, cool. I don't want to worry too much about this. I'll have the shadow come down a bit more on these little divvy bits, because they'll sort of come down with outfit as these little, where the dress has these little pleats in. It'll have the shadow get a bit longer naturally, so I might show those gentle bits of shadow there to sort of imply the rest of it. Otherwise, that's looking good. Moving down, I'll make sure I do the shoes and don't forget them. Do some simple shading there, a bit more there, and just cut that out, and there we go, that should do. And there as well, some shading in and out. Maybe out and in. A little bit more on there. Right, cool, that's looking nice. Alright, Control T. Oh, I need to do the metallic-y bits too. Now, I'm not going to put a lot into these, so I'm going to do a little bit around the edges, so maybe just a bit of a shine-ish sort of there. And this will be just mainly there as an excuse to then pick up with some highlights after. So under that bit there, I feel like that could work. Maybe a little bit around here. Right. Now for the jewel thing, same thing. A bit of more of a soft gradient. I haven't got many soft gradients in this, so I can maybe do one here. I'll make it sort of stand out a little bit, I think. Cool, that's looking nice. Control D. Alright, now this shading here looks a bit too sort of mechanical, looks a bit too purple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my shading layer. I'll firstly make a copy of my flats. I'll put it above my shading layer. And I'm going to go Control U on the keyboard. And I'm going to lower the hue by about 20-ish. And the luminosity by about the same amount. Like that. That's quite good. Cool. And then I clip that to my shading layer. And you'll notice that I go from purple to having a version of that color. Now, of course, I can let some of the purple shine through, like that, and have it come through a little bit. It still looks a little bit cold, so I might actually make this a little bit of a warmer color. Yeah, about there is a bit better. That's a bit better. So that's using the more of an orangey shading color, so more of an orange base. Alright, Rooney. And now, next thing I want to do is any last-minute color adjustments. So before I make anything too weird, I might just quickly grab the skin tone here and do a similar adjustment there. Make a bit more saturation, so make sure it stays on max, and just lower the luminosity a smooch. That. And down to about there, maybe? About there feels about right. Good. That's a good color. And I might do a similar thing with the background to just sort of pale it out a little bit. And Control U, and just lift the luminosity a touch. Cool. Control T. Alright, now with that, I can start doing a little bit of shading on the ground. I'm just going to grab my tool there, and I'm going to select the ground, and here I'm going to do my drop shadow. Now, a drop shadow is going to be a very sort of generic drop shadow. I want to make sure I've got some of the right color. So I've got that selected there. I'll grab my brush. Grab my shading color. I'll do my shadow just very, very broadly. About there, that sort of shape, maybe a big sort of hammery outline or something. It gets a bit blurry the further out you get from a thing that has a shadow, so I won't worry too much, but there. I think the shadow comes down a bit too low. Yeah, it's much too low. Right. Get rid of the bottom bit. Cut that in a little bit. There and there. And there, and that's probably about right-ish shadow-wise. Alright. Getting coming from the, oops daisy, from the shoes there. Looks good. And there, and a bit more coming in from that shoe there. And then I'll get rid of these little excessy bits here. Good. Oops daisy. That, and then I'll just blur the edges a little bit. Just they're a little bit less clear towards the edge. As I get further from the object, that becomes less clear. I'll get rid of a bit of that there, because that needs to be a bit less exact. Looking good. And then maybe I'll have a bit of implied sort of ground detail along like that. And then I'll just eat into that a little bit on that wrong side. There we go. I'll put that on the edge there, that's what I wanted to do. Yeah, a bit like that. Alright, groovy. And I'll have my blush come up a little bit brighter. It's a bit more visible. That looks good. Groovy. Now I'll get on to a very quick highlights layer, I think. So, new layer. And just go straight to white. So I don't do too much of this one. And I might go to... Alright, get my brush. And I'm just going to draw in some very basic highlights. A lot of it's going to be on this actual hammer of all things. So I want that to look like it's got a bit of shine. So I'm just going to pay a bit of attention to just the little edges here. Just so I can sort of imply maybe some weathering, or some dents and so forth. And I'll remember where I'm doing it so I can be a bit consistent when I follow it down the rest of the length of it. Because again, with metallic shapes, you've got to be consistent with anything reflective because it's based on the thing that's in front of it. And no matter what the shape of it is, the thing in front of it will be relatively consistent. So there we are, like that. And then a little bit around the edge there, so it's sort of close. No, it's too far away. You can see on this, I've got it like dark bit, white bit, empty bit. So I've got to have that same sort of logic here. If it is a bit compressed from the shape of the object, that logic still has to be in place for it to work. Looking good. Alrighty. So again, let's do a bit of detail on here. So we'll do a bit of a shaping. I might actually partially erase this out when I do it. So I'm going to do some big shapes. That. And then I'm going to just sort of cut them in and out and just make them sort of smoother. Like that, so they fit a bit nicer. And then once I've done that, I'm going to partially erase them and clean them up a bit. So things like that. And get rid of that bit there. And then like this sort of shape. Maybe there and sort of come up, maybe around there. Yeah, that looks about right. Cool. It's a pretty good shape. There we are, and then I'll put a little break in there for where the hair comes through. And that bit there as well, a bit more there, and there. And just make sure I don't leave any fuzzy edges to it. Pretty good. Alright, moving down, I'll make sure this is above the line art layer, because I want to do it over the top of some of the bits of line art. So, for instance, I want to have some here on the eyes, picking up some shine. So, nice big shine there. And then a little one there, I think. I'll do the same thing on this side as well. I'll sort of squeeze them down a little bit, though. And then one bit here that's sort of overlapping. And there as well. And down the face, I'll probably do be a bit more on some of the bits of leather, maybe. So a little bit here, maybe sort of imply a bit of a join, and a little bit there, where it's sort of picking up a shine from the edge. And there also, I think that could pick up a little bit. And then the medallion thing, sort of pick up a big sort of shine there, and there, and there, and then just like on the eyes, big bloob, little bloob, bit of the end there. Cool. Moving down, I won't do too much here, but I might do a little bit of a pickup on this bit of the latch, that bit there, and maybe one or two just little bits of this, just to imply that the rest of them do have a bit of sort of gilding to them. So just a little bit here and there. Alright, let me get my big soft eraser and just clean some of this up a little bit, so it's not too strong. Maybe not that much. A bit more there, a bit more there. Looking pretty good. Alright, so once I've done that, I'm just going to grab another one, and I'm going to put this one on the screen, and make this one blue. I just want something to sort of give me a bit of a sort of sky colour from off to the side. So I'm just going to grab my layer here, so I'll grab my metal colour, and I will Control Alt, and then click on the line art layer to deselect just the line art layer. With Control and Alt, and then clicking on the thumbnail, we'll make whatever's in that layer a deselected area. And now I'm just going to do a bit of a blue there and just lower it down a bit because I just want it to pick up a smidge of that blue. So just a screen layer on top. I'm getting a bit of shine from some of the objects and a little bit maybe on the hair, I think. A little bit of light off from the side there just to sort of separate it out a little bit. And then yeah, that should work. I might just get rid of the shading there too, so I might fill that in. Oops, daisy. That's better. Then a little bit, yes, I'll get rid of that bit of shading there. Come back to my screen layer and pop a little bit of a highlight there. Then a little bit along the side of the arm there as well. I don't need to delete this because the colour's too similar. And then a little bit around the edge of the dress here as well. Daisy. also grab that goldy colour. Try that again. It's looking pretty decent. Alright, I like where that's going. I'm just going to do a quick little bit of a change on this. I'm going to add just a couple of blush strokes. I just feel like that skin texture needs a bit more sort of showiness to the variation. That's too uneven. Let me just clean that one up. And then try that again. Much broader strokes, much more even. That's much better. Alright, cool. And then, with that, I think I'm getting towards the end. The last thing I want to do is a little bit of subsurface scattering. So I'm going to control-click on my shading layer. I'm going to grab a new layer. And I'm going to use that selection I've made as my mask. Go back to it. Set it to screen. Pick a nice sort of red. And now, when I brush over, what's going to happen is it'll only brush in some screen where I've already got shading. So this lets me pop in some subsurface scattering without having to be very neat. I can just throw some in and it'll just happen, which is lovely. And a bit more there, a bit there. I think I need to really add some here, but I will anyway. And then the hairline, and just to soften those edges a bit. There you go, and a bit more there. Some of this might be a little hard, but that's okay. You can get a bit of attention, that's fine. I feel like that's hitting a lot of the beats that I want it to. Maybe put more yellow into that. One little touch up, I'm just going to grab that. And maybe just make it a little more. No, not that colour. There, yeah, that works. Okay, and then I'll grab that screen layer, and I'll grab my big soft eraser. So I'll grab some of that. There we go. Drop D. I'll go back to my lovely sort of blue screen layer. And be on brush. That's right, can't switch to brush with B from that. So grab that manually. Select this background. Big soft airbrush. I'm just going to airbrush a little bit in around that edge there, just to sort of cool it down a touch. Is it really working? Why isn't it working? Oh, no, it is working. Yeah, that's fine. Alright, groovy. Even more blue. Oh, that's much better. There we go, a bit more a grade to it. Cool. Alright, I like the look of that. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of extra work on the eyes here. So I'm just going to grab a glow layer on top. So new layer, add glow, a bit of orangey colour. Make sure I'm selecting just the eyes. And then get my brush back here. And I'm just going to add maybe a sort of yellowy orange. And just very gently throw a little bit in, just to give the eyes a bit more life to them. And I'll call it there. We've got our colour. We might just do, actually we might do one little effect. So I'll go layer, merge visible to new layer. And I'll duplicate that. And then I'll go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And I'm going to blur the absolute crackle out of it. Perfect. Go OK. And then I'm going to go edit, tonal correction, level correction, and compress the levels in and make it into like a deep fried meme looking thing. Like that. Okay. Set that layer to overlay and then lower the opacity down. That's just a great way of getting a bit more intensity in it, like that. There we go. Maybe a bit too much there. I'll just lower that down a smidge. There we are. Alright, and I'll call that finished. So we've got our character from a high angle with a hammer. Looks pretty good. Now, if you like these 1-to-1 speed draw-alongs, I've got a whole bunch of other ones on the channel that you can have a look at. I've got probably, I think, 7 or 8 now. So follow along. I've even got one where we do some landscapes, which is kind of fun. So have a look through them. If you like what you see and you want to support the channel, like, subscribe, comment, tell me what sort of things you'd like to do in these normal, these 1-to-1 speed draw-alongs, or what you'd like to see in my big sort of tutorial style videos. We also got a Discord where you can pop in and share the work there. So if you've been drawing along, I would love to see your work if you want to post it in there. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. You have a fantastic day. Bye.